Ben, the last couple months after Tim's given his introduction, I keep saying, believe it or not, that was a short one for Tim. I'm not sure we can say that this month, right?
He's on fire. He's on fire.
He was on fire. He had things to say. The Tim meter.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Tim meter. The Tim meter is falling asleep. Hopefully not like the rest of us. Anyway, Tim, we love you. Thank you for, as the owner of this establishment, having this forum. Girl Talk. Erica's here representing Girl Talk. And so many great bands and other cultural events. But we'll get right to it. As you guys can see, we have a lot of people on stage. We have a full show and a lot to talk about. So let's quickly introduce everybody. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
All right, Ben Joravsky, Chicago Reader and WCPT, 8:20 a.m. Just rushed over here from my show. And been writing about Chicago public schools forever. So I'm ready to go with our guests.
All right.
Most of them have been on my radio show, except for Jen A here, but this three right here.
All right.
Yeah.
Janae Strong is coordinator with Grassroots Education Movement. State Representative Robert Martwick, thank you for joining us. Mary Fahey Hughes, Director of 19th Ward Parents for Special Education. Did I get that right?
Yes.
All right.
Board member for Raise Your Hand.
And a board member for Raise Your Hand. And Alderman Joe Moreno of, what ward number is that, Joe? 1, First Ward. First Ward. Thank you all for coming. Yeah. And I'm Mick Dumke of ProPublica, and Ben and I, how long have we been doing this?
Since 2014, and Proco Joe Moreno was at our first show. He is now has the triple play. He was at our show one of the most depressing nights of my life. Joe probably saw it a little differently. Election night of 2015, when the city of Chicago, in its infinite wisdom, decided to re-elect Mayor Rob as its mayor, and we had a show that night.
And it was announced that Rom had beaten Chewy about 15 minutes of the show into the show.
If that.
And that particular night, and I apologize if any of you were actually there. I mean, I literally apologize to you.
I'm sorry.
Because I think we had, it was on TV, and it was a 2-hour show.
Yeah, it was a 2-hour.
We were 15 minutes into it, everyone's depressed and ready to go home.
Well, not everyone.
Joe actually did go home.
Joe said, I got places to go.
So... Anyway, but we're not here to
reminisce about those days.
Fond memories. Tim already got us depressed, so let's get this thing going.
Let's get this thing going.
Thank you.
Okay, there was, as everyone here knows, an education funding bill actually passed and was signed by the governor last week. Was this a good or a bad thing? Let's start with one of the people who voted on it, State Representative Martwick. Tell us about it.
So the answer is yes and no. There was much in the bill that was phenomenal, right? As many people here know, our education bill that we passed, the legislature, was Senate Bill 1. This bill contained 95% of what was in Senate Bill 1. And in terms of, if you're a Chicagoan, the money that was trying to really correct the inequity with the city of Chicago faced in terms of funding their schools versus the rest of the schools in the state, this was even better. It was more money for the Chicago Public Schools. So there was much to really like about this bill. It was what everyone had advocated for. There was a little sweetener in it for the city of Chicago, even more money than what the governor had railed about as being a Chicago bailout. There was the creation of a task force to study TIFs and make recommendation on reining in TIFs.
Somebody mentioned TIFs on this show before Ben. That's worth pointing out.
A record.
Thank you.
I know who I'm up here with. And then, of course, there was, for me, the poison pill, which was a $75 million unfunded transfer of public money to private schools by giving a $75 million tax break to the wealthiest and corporations. And coming on the heels of a 2.5-year budget impasse where we didn't have, we were so broke we can't afford to pay attention. And people say $75 million is a drop in the bucket in the state fund. And I say, that may be true, but it is that sort of thinking that got us into this financial mess in the first place. In order to, everyone jumps up and down and says, we created equity in funding for schools. That's not true. We passed a formula that will create equity when we fund schools properly. And in order to fund schools properly, according to the commission that studied this, we need another, get this, $6.5 billion to be put into education spending. So how much did we put in more to sweeten the pot? $350 million. $350 million. We need $6.5 billion, we put in $350 million. How do you give away $75 million at that point? To me, it was a serious failure in prioritization, and that's why I voted no.
Anybody have a different take? All right.
Well, Mary, from your perspective,
Yes.
what really upset you about that bill?
What really upsets me about this bill is that our tax dollars are now going to fund private education that has no obligation to serve children with special needs and leaves our most vulnerable students without school choice, the all-important school choice, all for the benefit of the privatizers. And it enrages me that as a Catholic that Cardinal Supich went along with this, that he was behind it, making phone calls. Because he didn't go downstate. He just made a few phone calls to the mayor and to legislators to make sure that this would take care of his people, because it's going to make it better for kids in CPS. It is not going to make it better for kids in CPS. And the most vulnerable kids will not benefit from this.
Well, Alderman Moreno, try to put a good spin on this if you can. Is there a good spin to be put on it? I know I've been talking to a lot of different people who've told me this. Curious your thoughts.
Let me first say that I agree with both panelists and most of the Latino caucus. I can't say that all of us signed the letter, but most of us signed a letter against the bill for the very reasons that were given. Our administration was not too happy with us, especially those of us that are chairman, that are supposed to always side with the mayor. But in our analysis, I don't want to repeat what everyone said, but it was the right thing to do and try to urge that part of the bill to get out of it. And we did that obviously way before the vote. So I agree with the panelists. I thought it was very interesting today, Mary Mitchell's article. Did you read that in the Sun-Times? So, who I have a lot of respect for.
Why would I read this?
Why would you read your own paper, right?
No, he doesn't work there anymore.
That's right. True. But anyway, that's a sidebar. But someone that was part of the Harold Washington administration, and I read a lot of, came out with a very strong support.
Oh, that was Laura Washington.
Laura Washington. I'm sorry, Laura Washington.
Got your columnists mixed up.
Sorry, Laura Washington, and so
I did read that column.
Okay.
I was like, what's Mary Mitchell column talking about?
Sorry, Laura Washington, and who I have a lot of respect for, read. So when you said who has a different view, she has it in black and white today, and I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Yeah, for those who didn't see Laura's column, her column was championing the notion that there would be assistance for scholarships for students who want to go to private parochial schools. And she was pointing out that she herself is a product of parochial education in Chicago back when she went to school, and that her parents had to work long and hard to raise the money to pay for the tuitions. And so now this is a good thing. That the state is giving a tax credit for wealthy people to donate money to scholarship funds, because the principle is that some of that will trickle down to actually help children like today's generation of Laura Washingtons. So I don't know, we have not heard from you, John A. What is your thoughts on that argument?
Yeah, so I am also opposed to it, and I think what Martwick said was very important, is that the first piece around the formula is a positive piece. However, it's only provisional and contingent upon more revenue to be put into the schools. And I think the biggest piece around what actually happened is not an investment in public education, but actually, again, ROM selling out public schools for a tax shelter for the wealthy. And I think that's the pattern that we've continually seen. And when we're in a city that has been in the highlight for violence, been in the highlight for lack of community institutions and investment, I don't understand how a mayor can continue to make these type of decisions and prioritize the wealthy over those who are the most at risk and not be held accountable, right? Even when there are mechanisms by which we could sustainably fund schools, be it the TIF, be it the corporate head tax or progressive revenue, right? And so I think the larger thing that was hitting for me is that the debt that's going to be going from the voucher piece of this is added to the debt that's already been there, added to the profiting off of the murder of black bodies through police brutality bonds that's also kind of blew up 2 years ago after Laquan. So this is kind of like a holistic divestment from community institutions and then profiting off of the negative impacts for corporate interests.
The first part of your statement is the one I want to address right now, where you put the blame on Rom. I'm as ready to blame Rom for everything in the city as anyone else in Chicago. But in this particular instance, this $75 million handout to rich people in the name of helping poor people, I don't know if Rom was the instigator of this, and so I'll turn to Representative Martwick because you were there on the floor. My sense is that this was a deal that my dear friend Michael Madigan cooked up with the Cardinal. Am I wrong or am I right on that one?
Well, if it was, I wasn't in the room for it. But what I would say is this. So the mayor was very aggressive in calling legislators and voicing his support for this. I'm not terribly surprised by that because, of course, he's facing a crisis of epic proportions in the finances of CPS, and this is an influx of $466 million, I've heard, is the latest figure I've heard, $466 million. So I understand that, and I think that for some of the legislators who voted for it, again, they said the good outweighs the bad, and so I'm going to do this. This is a provision. Now imagine this, the governor vetoes SB1 and uses his mandatory veto power to SB1 and changes all of these provisions of the bill, completely changes the bill entirely. And so when they sit down and negotiate a compromise, then you would think that the compromise would be between somewhere in the middle of what SB1 was and what the governor wanted in the bill. And instead the compromise was everything we wanted in SB1 and more money for Chicago, if you could even imagine that, as long as the governor got this piece in there. So I put the blame on this on the governor, but I'm not going to dismiss what you said, Ben, because the part that really disappointed me about this was that we were called to Springfield and told that there was a deal. And initially we were called Monday at 4:30, and my guess is they weren't even going to have a caucus meeting to tell us what was in the bill. And when there was a big pushback from the legislators, then they moved the arrival time up to 11 so that we could have a long caucus and talk it out. And then they sort of conducted this 1, 2, 3 vote thing where we went in and we voted for the bill and it failed. And then we went back into caucus. We had this 2.5-hour caucus. We go in, the bill fails. We come back, and the speaker says to us, and I suppose I'm not supposed to say what goes on the caucus, but basically what he said was, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to vote for the override of the bill. And when that fails, when we don't have it, we're putting this bill back on the board, and now it's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to fund schools. And so we go back, the override fails because the Republicans wouldn't join us in the override. This bill immediately goes back on the board. 20 minutes, they'd wait for some time to pass. And the point that bothered me the most, how many speakers? Now, the first time the bill was up, everyone kind of knew it was going to fail. Yeah. It's the second time up when this is our only choice. This is when we've had no committee hearings, we've had no expert testimony, we've had no time for contemplation. All we get is a floor debate. Yeah. How many speakers? 2 speakers. I was one of them. And then they used a procedural maneuver to cut off debate and force a vote. And I couldn't believe it. And that solidified my no.
All right, well, let's get to the heart of the choice that legislators had to make in this particular instance. And I'm going to put this to you, Mary. Yeah, you're a tough activist on the Southwest side, speaking up for public schools and speaking up for special education. Let's say you're a state rep. And here's and Speaker Madigan comes to you and says, look, it's either money for Chicago or you get to wave your little I don't want privatization money flag. What's it going to be?
And don't forget that the Cardinal has already come to you and said, I want you to have love in your heart.
Yeah, right. Don't forget the Cardinal has come to you. So what are you going to vote, Mary?
I say no, absolutely not. I say bring out another bill. Get another bill through. I mean, I know they were at the end of this legislative session, but it's again, after 2 years of nothing under this governor, we would have the opportunity to see what a major obstructionist he is, and it's on him. All of this is on him, and for him to have a victory of these proportions is just disgusting to me.
Yeah. Well, Joe.
All right, Alderman, let's say you're there. What's your vote? Tell us your rationale.
Well, I hope I would have been hope I would have been in the room discussing the bill rather than being thrown at the last minute. And that's sort of the way I've looked at it on the city council. You know, there's choices you make as someone that has to make votes and has to make decisions. And, you know, I've tried to do my best to be part of the initial conversations on ordinances rather than being told at the last minute. I'll give an example that's germane to this group and my heart, and I know yours, is when the mayor introduced a $10 minimum wage bill. As some of you know, I introduced the $15 minimum wage bill. The administration came to me and sort of gave me a laugh and said, fine, Joe, but, you know, we're never going to go higher than 10. And I knew what fight we had then, right? So working with SEIU and others on our task force, at the very beginning we got to 13. We still should be pushing for 15. We should be pushing for that at the state. I know the governor vetoed it. We should be pushing for that, but we came to that compromise. So I would have hoped that, I've been there now almost 7 years, that I would have been in that room and been able to come out earlier and said, there's a poison pill in this, guys, think about this more. Because one of the criticisms, Rob, the representative just explained, you know, sort of his criticism of the process at the state is a criticism that comes out all the time, lesser now, but still there, that things come out last minute and decisions have to be made either overnight or in hours. And, you know, I just would hope that I would be in a position that I think I'm in with the city council where, you know what, sooner to try to stop this kind of crap. Same with DACA. It was very important what was said today, and I know this panel isn't about this, but you know, that community and whatnot has been preparing for this for years and was preparing. It wasn't Obama's #1 issue either. I love Barack Obama, but immigration reform and DACA were not things he was going to do right away, as we know. We took into our second term, and now we see the reverse of that, which is very sad, and my office was packed tonight on my ward night on that. So, long answer to your question, but that's my answer.
We have seen, I mean, in fairness, and I'm not trying to beat up on you, but I mean, we've seen the city council do this plenty of times. This is an old maneuver, and it's not unique to the Illinois House. It's not unique to the Chicago City Council. The Republicans have tried to do this in Congress to rush stuff through without much debate. It's sadly a tried and true approach in our democracy.
And to that point, I've never quite seen, maybe people in the audience when we get to Q&A can correct me, something so blatantly like a play for that legislators can make to the constituents, where you have a vote that, as Rob explained it, the first vote is where everybody gets to vote no to the tax break for rich people, knowing full well that there's going to be a second vote that really counts. And a lot of progressive types were fooled completely. I mean, the Chicago Teachers Union sent out a blurb on Facebook. It killed, or it died, it was killed. And I remember other lefty types sending out, "Oh my God, we killed it, we killed it." And I was like, the maestro's still working, you folks. And then Madigan, bam. He got enough people to flip. That's why we call him the maestro. We got enough people who voted no the first time around, which they'll probably send out in campaign flyers. I voted no, right, Joe? Isn't that the trick you do? And then, mention.
Hey, that Barack Obama said, and I think Harold Wallace said politics in Chicago ain't beanbag. So I didn't make that up.
No, it is politics. It's a political maneuver, and
My representatives, Fran Hurley and Bill Cunningham, voted in favor. These are lifelong 19th Ward Democrats, voted in favor of this bill, saying that they just couldn't leave the schools unfunded, and it's disingenuous, and it's the gun to your head policy of this governor that is appalling.
Yeah, let's not leave him off of the hook. That's John A. What do you? The first part of this is with how the Democrats behave. We can get into how Rauner, the unbelievable hypocrisy of Rauner, his flip-flop. But what do you say to people to keep them to vote Democrat after they see something like this, where is an essential betrayal of a precept? It's like Betsy DeVos policy from a Democratic Party that has said we will resist Betsy DeVos every step of the way. So how do you get folks to still believe in the Democratic Party?
I mean, I think I encourage folks to ask that question, to be critically engaging. What does that mean that the Democrat vote can move that way? And just to really understand if the priority is supposed to be with the communities that are going to be most impacted, and they can make a decision like this, which is, let's be very clear, it's not just about $75 million tax credit per year, $375 million over 5 years, but it's about continuing to design an agenda that pushes out and escalates a mass exodus of Black and brown families from the city of Chicago. We are pushing out Black and brown families from public space by taking away the funding for public space to exist through schools with this piece, right? And so I don't know how I could support someone who says, well, because it's a Democratic move, that is a positive move. At some point, we do have to start articulating and questioning and challenging and doing things like this, coming to these type of forums and creating spaces where we're actually engaging a vision, because I don't think a vision or a priority is actually being reflected in moves like this, right? Like, we know what we want. We have a mayor who is claiming that he's like a sanctuary mayor, but then we know that deportations are still happening in Chicago. I was at a rally maybe 3-4 days ago where 5 activists on the ground from the community are actually facing deportation, like right now as we speak, right? But there's the one Chicago, and then there's a federal lawsuit, and then there's all these kind of ploys publicly that this is the priority. But we are very clear that that's not actually the lived experience. And so I think the push is to be able to both name that, and then both to engage calls to action with each other, to be able to push for the public good to actually belong to the people, right? And that we have some type of power and some type of voice. Elected representative school board, which Martwick has also been very incremental in that, is something that we've been fighting for, right? Why is it that all the things that are important in Chicago in terms of public space are by appointment? And why, with that appointment, with the Democratic mayor, are the decisions that are being made actually pushing more negative impact than positive good?
That's Democratic Mayor capital D, not small d. Right? All right, devil's advocate. This is the job I often play here. So what was the solution? No funding for schools? I mean, isn't politics the art of compromise? Weren't the Democrats going to have to give something to get this through, to get this past the governor, to get him to sign off, and to get at least a couple of votes so you could get this thing through?
I wasn't there. I wanted to kind of come back and connect to you. When we had this discussion, I may have brought up about the supermajorities at this show, right?
That's correct, you did.
And that was my concern. I think it's a lot better then, but my concern at the time was we kept having these, the committeemen and the aldermen are primarily responsible and help state reps, state senators, and others get signatures to get on the ballot. And that work and volunteerism was always saying how important it was for us to keep supermajorities. And at the time, my frustration was, if you don't use it, what's the point, right? What's the point? And so I think that needs to be a further discussion. And then, your show, but that's what I wanted to say on that. I think you want to directly answer.
Is it though, Joe? Is it?
To respond to your devil's advocacy, I want to say that this bill is based on so many lies. The idea that voucher systems actually help student performance, they don't. They've been proven to be underperforming public education, public options. So to forward an agenda that is more about giving wealthy people a tax break who could just as well set up their own scholarship programs if they really want to put money into private education. They don't need to get a tax break for that. So it's about helping out the wealthy at the expense of the poor under the guise of caring and supporting the downtrodden. It is just a load of hooey. And
all right, that said, the Republicans advocate for that load of hooey. Sorry, I can't even say it right. So whether you like it or not, whether you think it's true or not, this is the position they take. So the question is, don't you have to give something to get something?
Well, I guess I would put this to Representative Martwick because they make it more specific. Let's say that a cockamamie tax credit deal that we're not quite sure who created, be it Madigan, Rauner, Rahm, the Cardinal, Cullerton. I always forget Cullerton, He's just like the sidekick. But anyway, I know that's not fair.
he likes to fly under the radar.
Yeah. All right. Let's just put that for the side. We never did allow this funding distribution bill to come to a vote. We never did push the issue. This kind of gets to Joe's point. We never did have that showdown vote. They cut the deal where the four cardinals, as they call them, the four tops, or whatever you want to call them, the four leaders in Springfield, got together.
Are you including the actual cardinal?
No.
Cardinals?
Isn't it the House Speaker, minority member, those cardinals? So we never really got to that point where we had a put up or shut up vote on overriding Rauner's veto. Would that have passed?
No. I don't believe that it would have. But I get where you're going with this, and these thoughts go through my head as well. Like the thought that goes through my head most about that vote was, how did we wind up in that position? I'm going to answer both of your questions with this. I am a pragmatist. I have strong progressive ideology, but I like to get things done. And so I have made more compromises than I care to admit in the interest of moving the state forward. I believe in that. But I think that there are things that you can compromise on and things that you cannot. So I will start out with number one, the answer to your question, Mick, which is that I think that on the issue of transferring public money to private institutions, I think that is a core value of the Democratic Party, and I think that's something that you don't compromise on. Even if I was to say that I would consider compromise on that, I could see a situation where maybe we say, well, gee, Illinois is 4th in the country in terms of funding public education, and we just ran a huge budget surplus, and gosh, we've gotten control of all of our pension debt, and we've paid down our backlog of bills. What are we going to do with all this money? Hey, about this plan. Okay, I could be open to anything. But let me repeat the stats since I said them. We're dead last in education. We have the highest pension debt in the country. We have the highest backlog of unpaid bills in the country. And we just passed we had 2.5 years of running $8 billion deficits. how on earth do you fit this into your priorities? So you know, like, I'm all for compromise. To me, this was a compromise that I couldn't find a way to get to. And like I said, there's no doubt that, and I will not, you know, I will say this again and again, there's no doubt that this bill does an awful lot of good. An awful lot of good. The question is, was it worth the price? When we talk about these, what it did, and here's something that gets missed in this whole discussion. So you want to talk about compromise? You want to talk about compromising the core value of the Democratic Party? In the budget deal that we just passed with 15 Republicans, where we overrode the governor on his veto and finally passed a budget, yay, let's take a victory lap. In that bill was exactly what we're talking about. We increased the educational tax credit from $500 to $750. And you say, well, $500 to $750, that doesn't sound like much. Yeah, but that's an $80 million program. So we just passed, 2 months ago, a $40 million shift of public funds to private institutions. How on earth did we take this up now?
Not to mention, there was a hidden $90 million for charter schools in this bill that many legislators were not even aware was in the bill. So to say that this is not just about privatization and making the rich richer is, again, a load of doohickey. I don't know.
One thing, I like your words. One thing to Ben about politicizing this, and I actually just got a text from my daughter. I might have to run a few minutes earlier, right when we're done. She started her first day of high school at CPS today. So, yeah, she's texting me, and I haven't seen her yet since after school. But Forrest Claypool sent a letter out today. I got this as a parent of a CPS student, not as the alderman, applauding the bill, and then listing the Chicago legislators that voted for it, and asking people to call them or write them and thank them. You know, so.
And not listing, obviously, the ones who voted no. Or do they list them and say you're supposed to call them and boo?
I didn't know what. So do I. I didn't see Rob or my state representative Gazzardi on there either. So. That was just sent out this afternoon.
Wow. That's just one of the little fruits of being a parent of a Chicago public student. You get to see your tax dollars at work there.
They did. So there was a story about this today where they did. The CPS had principals reaching out to legislators and telling them to support this. And when I asked principals who called me about, like, well, are you for this? Well, no, we're not for that, but we're for the whole bill.
Yeah.
Well, but that's in it, you know. But so again, principals were advocating for something they didn't know what they were advocating for, and they were doing it at the direction of CPS.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the governor for a second? So, what does the governor get out of this? Let's everyone pretend like you understand what he's doing or what he's thinking. I'm just curious what everyone thinks. Everyone's been talking, and obviously we live in a Democratic city. These are two Democratic representatives. All of us live in Democratic districts. What do you think the governor was up to with this whole thing? What does he get out of this? And I'll just put it out there, it seems to me he managed to make everybody mad at him with this thing. Or am I completely wrong?
I disagree. I think this is a huge win for him because, number one, with the press attention that he draws, he gets to run around claiming that he got more money to schools than has ever gotten before. And really, in his tenure, we've put $1 billion more towards education than we had before he got there. So he gets to claim for that, even though he didn't really have much to do with that. But he still gets to claim it. Secondly, he gets to claim that he fixed the most inequitable funding formula and made it equitable for the first time in 20 years, which is true. That's what the bill does. And then he gets to go to his base and claim that he did this thing where he gets, these tax credits to promote private education and provide choice, so it's win-win-win for him, absolutely.
But for 2 years, 2.5, 3 years since he started campaigning, all he's been doing is campaigning against Mike Madigan, promising he was going to beat Mike Madigan, bring fiscal discipline to Illinois, and he did none of those things.
I think. I disagree a little bit with the representative in this sense. So I'm from the Quad Cities, Moline, Illinois. My parents are still in the home. I was born in good Democrats. But the message there, this representative knows from his colleagues, in other words, is, Chicago is evil on many levels, right? And it's a bailout for Chicago, and it's bailout. And I think there's probably a room like this called the Outhide, where the opposite of this room on the far right is having a conversation saying, we only got $75 million, and look how much Chicago got, and this governor and sold us out. I know those are conversations that are happening. So I'm not sure that he can get $75 million and claim huge victory. I think Speaker Madigan, to your point, can play the whole thing out and can say that that he's on the right side of a lot of things in this bill that passed and got it done. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
what do you guys think? What's your take?
I mean, I'm still thinking about the long game in the agenda of this agenda and what was the urgency? I mean, I've been on many campaigns that go through legislation, and we're really just waiting for our bill to get called. We're waiting for a vote on things that matter. We know will actually give autonomy to community residents, and yet the urgency of this, why was it pushed so hard? And so this is kind of how I'm thinking about it. And I think long term, the benefit of this is that with the moving out of impacted Black brown communities from public space, by draining public education, you also see the dissolution of political power. And I think we're already in a city that lacks transparency and voice for political power, and which contributes to why we have a mass exodus. And so I think this continues to accelerate that. I think, again, going back to the point that if we're able to drain not only the revenue, but also the ability to impact these decisions and do it in these sweeping ways, right, that are so fast and so quick, and also be able to push narratives that are framed as victories, right? I mean, we have to be very clear. The sophistication of the narrative is very sophisticated. Yeah. I mean, it's framed as civil rights, And so I think definitely being able to use this and say that, this is a victory, while in fact underneath our eyelids, political power is actually being taken from families.
Yeah, I think that this is all part of the master plan. Alec, Trump, Devos, Bronner. It's all about privatization. It's all about breaking unions. It's about keeping the electorate kind of dumbed down and making a lot of white wealthy men, keeping them wealthy.
Well, I'd like to point out Representative Martwick, someone who, very astute observer of Chicago politics, who I think works for you, pointed out to me the other day, there's going to be another budget fight before the November 2018 election. I forgot about that. I thought the election, because it seems like the election's been going on for so long. I'm like, oh my God, we talk about winners and losers in the typical political way, but we're doing this again next year. You know what I'm saying?
And the election that you're already worn out on hasn't actually started yet.
They haven't even started circulating. Oh, wait, have they started circulating today? Today's the first day, yeah. So it's like this thing. But Ron, can we just take a moment to just talk about how schizophrenic Ron was? It was just in July, was it? This is not the funding bill, as Representative Martwick has instructed me many times. This is the distribution bill. This is the bill that determines how the money gets funded. So the funding bill was passed as part of the budget. It took a full override to override Ronner's veto. After which Ronner went to Hegwish, right, and proclaimed that that tax hike was a 2x4 against the foreheads of taxpayers throughout Illinois. That's what he said, a 2x4. Then, fast forward 2 months, he's at a school in Edgebrook, your neck of the woods, not blaming you, but saying, what a wonderful thing, reading, scaring the hell out of kids by reading stories to them, hugging around, reminiscing about how much he loves daily. I mean, that's the very bill he ripped Martwick for and Madigan for is now the one he's taking credit for. So it only works.
And in between, he had the Illinois Policy Institute's cartoon flag, which he claimed he had nothing to do with, even though half their staff is now, or was, his staff. and then he fired someone who he said sent out the statement and said as a white man he couldn't comment on it. I assume everybody's seen the cartoon, right? So he's been all over the place on this.
So can we talk politics for a second?
we rarely do that here.
So seriously, like if we step away from the policy and we look sheerly at the politics, so many people who are hardcore progressive Democrats are like, oh, he's done because we all hate him. And I'm like, there's the rest of the state we got to worry about. And he's got $70 million in the bank, and he hasn't even started raising money yet, okay? So I was never of the mindset that this guy's one term and he's done. We'll get rid of him so easily. I think this is going to be a monumental task, okay? But when you looked at what he had been through over the course of the last 6 months, I thought to myself, holy moly, this guy's self-destructing. Yep, we can beat him. We can beat him. He's self-destructing. And when he takes this monumental shift to the right, hiring all of these Illinois Policy Institute, then you got the racism issue, we had him right in the sights. And then we went and forced all the Democrats to vote for a bill that will likely get many of my colleagues' primaries.
Yeah.
Where is the political sense in that? I don't understand that for the life of me. How do you sacrifice, how do you make your members cross their core constituencies for something that appeases the right before you're about to head into this monumental gubernatorial campaign? I don't understand the politics of that.
But the voucher thing I know everyone's upset about it, not good policy, but is that really such a huge thing for the right compared to all the stuff that he just did? I mean, Joe was just talking about the bailout for Chicago. This is my argument, is that I think he, over the last couple months, has imperiled himself with the right. After 2 or 3 years, say what you will about the guy, he didn't accomplish anything except sticking to his line that I'm out to stand up to Madigan and to bring fiscal discipline to the state, and he just blew that. He just blew it.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. We'll see, but
he probably, I can't read his mind. What a thought that would be. But maybe he came to the conclusion, this ain't working. I can't get elected. You know.
I agree with Mick.
Which part? That he's crazy.
Well, that's no, he's not crazy. He's just eating. You know, but I agree with Mick in the sense that, you know, again, there's probably a room somewhere, and I don't know if it's called the outhide or not. They're really upset that he gave all this money to, and what did we get? $75 million to them. In comparison, and I agree with the panel, everyone, that that's way too much money in this culture. But they're probably sitting there saying they got peanuts out of this thing, man.
That may have been a bad piece of legislation, but I think that was helpful to the Democrats for the next election.
So the only thing that I would say is that this was sold as a pilot program that goes away in 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I heard that laugh. I'm with you. This thing is not going away, and what you mentioned was that we're going to have a budget fight. I guarantee you that one of the bargaining points from the right will be an expansion of this program. Guarantee it. And it's not going away in 5 years. It is a $75 million tax credit. And so I don't know if people know the specifics of this work. You don't get a tax credit for donating to your local parochial school or private school. You get a tax credit for donating to a scholarship granting organization, SGO. These already exist, and they're already getting donations. Half the donations will come from corporations, half will come from individuals. And when I asked the people that were advocating on behalf of this program, I said, what's the breakdown of the individuals who donate, like from their income level? And they said, well, it depends on the limit, right? So if there's one state where there's $1,000 limit, you can donate $1,000 to get a tax credit, but no more. Well, of course, you have to raise from a lot more people, so it's a widespread people who take advantage of the credit. The more you raise the limits, the more it's going to be wealthy people who take advantage of it. And so I asked, what's the limit in Illinois? At this point, they didn't know. I thought it was going to be $20,000. And they said $1 million. And it's not $1 million donation. It's $1 million tax credit. So that means you can donate, so it's a 75% tax credit. So you can donate up to $1.3 million. Now mark my words on this. those tax credits are first come, first served. They are eligible for application on January 1st of 2018. I'm willing to bet right now, anybody want to take me up, I'll bet $5 to 1 that there will be no credits available on January 2nd, 2018. Because these people that are going to get the tax credit are already donating to SGOs and getting federal credit for it, and we just sweeten it. Now, to be fair, they're not going to get the federal credit. They're not going to get, it's a federal deduction. But the tax credit that we're giving them from the state outweighs that, so it sweetens the pot, it's better. But the idea that, and I get this pushback from my neighborhood, which is working class, middle class, they think two things. Number one, they think that they're going to go to the St. Robert's is my parish. They're going to go to St. Robert's fundraiser in April. They're going to write a $1,000 check and they're going to get $750 credit. No, you're not. Credits will be gone. Number two, they think their kids are going to get a scholarship to attend St. Robert's because they're already going there. They go, great, my tuition's lower now because I get a scholarship. No, because by and large, the people in my neighborhood won't qualify. The maximum income that you can earn family of four is $72,900. That's maximum, but these, and this is a good thing, that the scholarships they give start out with the lowest income kids first, and then you work your way out. So by the time you get to my neighborhood, if you're making more than $60,000 for a family of four, there will be none left. So, there's that aspect of it too. This is a tax cut for people that are already doing, so we're incentivizing behavior that people that are going to get the credit are already doing. And, you're basically, there's a big hole in the middle class. They get nothing out of this.
And this is, to the representative, if you want to, you talked about compromise, the representative made, I think, a good point about when you compromise and how. I went to Catholic school up until 7th grade. My parents actually and myself decided to go to the public school because it was actually better than going to the public high school and graduating. But let's say my parents are middle to lower middle class. I mean, if you really said we want to encourage people to be able, if they're strong Catholics or whatnot, to be able to send their kids who can't afford it, perhaps, we talked about this in some of our circles, perhaps the compromises for lower to middle class families that are sending their kids to school, that they may get a tax, incentive for already doing what they're doing. Again, I'm not saying that I support that, but that would call them to the carpet on what this really is. Instead of them saying, we want to help poor kids, we want to do these things. Okay, if you want to do that, we have a way to do it. Let's have the Moreno family or the Johnson family that makes $48,000 a year, that's struggling to get their kids, but a Catholic education is important. We're going to give them a tax credit on their tuition and see how they respond. I bet it wouldn't be the same.
Jen, I have a question. You're speaking about calling people on the carpet. Do you think the left, we talk so much about resistance in the age of Trump and how we should resist Trump, and here we have this Betsy DeVos plan, as both the alderman and the state rep have laid it out. Do you think that there should be challenges to the Democrats who voted for the tax credits?
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, my fundamental issue with this is that you can't call something equity if it's adding to inequity for the whole, right? Like, I don't think we should be talking about a small subset of folks who can get scholarships in what school district that's completely underfunded. We're still in a district that has upwards of 50 schools closed. The budget as it is going to include mid-year cuts. It's going to include closing nearly all the black high schools in Chicago. And the things that are offered on the city level are initiatives about mentoring and a program for graduation and your expectations. And I was at a rally today at Kelly High School where a high school freshman just articulated it very, very well. You have an expectation for me to succeed, but offer no opportunities for me to be supported to do so. And so fundamentally, I have a problem with asking for compromise of things that are public and human rights. I have a really big issue with that. How do you compromise what is a public good? How do you compromise if it could be sustainable when it should already be a given? And then frame it as promoting equity. I have a very, very strong opposition to that. And so I think that is the challenge that we have to give to the Democrats. It's like, which side are you on? And then your policies and the things that you vote for, how do they reflect that? And then when it comes to the solution, so what is the solution? I think that's how we hold the folks who are in elected office accountable. You have a job to do, right? Like, this is not just about the politics and the caucuses and the pressure of the votes. It's about, you have a constituency that does not have, most likely, mental health services, does not have a neighborhood school where they don't have to cross places that may be violent, which is why we have things like Safe Passage. Like, you have all these community institutions that have been depleted, and so that's how you go into that meeting, right? That's how you go into a vote. I understand that it was kind of done swiftly and there was some maneuvering and finagling with it, but in all that text, and I was reading through it, SB 1947, there was nothing that spoke directly to your constituency. Then how could you give a yes vote? And I think that we need to start naming it like that. It's just as simple as that.
And one other thing I want to throw out there, then we're going to get some questions from the audience. Ram, we just mentioned him for a minute. He is also claiming victory from this. Ram is feeling spiritually and politically renewed in the age of Trump because he looks so much better by comparison. So I wanted to ask you guys, I mean, what does this do anything for his reelection prospects? There's already speculation, people talking about who might, there are people dipping their toes in the water, speculation about who, if anyone, might take him on. And of course, he's got certainly not Ronner money in the bank, but he's got, some money as well. And, he can turn on that spigot. So my question is, what about Ron? Politically, what does this do for him? Does this help him say, hey, look, I pushed and ended up getting more money for CPS, and therefore, look at me, I should be your mayor again?
I would, God willing, hope this does not help Rahm Emanuel get reelected. There's still a $150 million hole in CPS's budget for this year with this historic revolutionary reform bill gone through, and I get that that is an improvement to what was there, but he is ripping out the foundation from public schools, and I'm hoping that my fellow 19th warders, or the constituents who really want a strong community and a city that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, really take him into account and hold him accountable for what he's done in his tenure to our schools. Because he's put through policies. I'm the special ed person. I'm very passionate about special education. And he has forwarded policies that are illegal and just all about cost-cutting, denying services for kids with special needs. If we don't take care of our neediest students, our poorest students, our most vulnerable students, what are we as a city? What are we as a society?
Alderman, you've been an ally of Rahm's at times. You have had some fights with Rahm. So what's your take on this?
To the question, I think there's a 35%, let's say, give or take 2 or 3%, baked in that will never vote for the mayor, right? Probably 95, 98%, 99%, maybe 100% of this room. So just with my political cap on, I don't think that moves him anywhere. There might be some movement in the middle with this bill, but what I like to sort of remind, and we're backing a lot of candidates in this next election, and maybe we can have another show on this, but you can't be Rahm or anyone, the representative, myself, any other elected official with nobody. Look at Governor Walker from Wisconsin. I mean, when they recalled him with 10 million signatures, and the left was super excited. I have friends up there that are organizing and everything. And the Democrats put, let's say, an average at best. I mean, I would say lame, but that's my personal opinion. But I think most people would say an average at best candidate up, and he won. So Walker won, right? And after millions basically said, we don't want your job, and which was a monumental task no one thought would be done. They got it done. I actually donated some money to the fund. So Yes, I think that it doesn't help them at 35%. Maybe it moves a little bit in those that are kind of like, well, I don't really like Rom. But those are the people that need to be convinced of, and that can't just be anyone. That has to be someone that's as dedicated, if not more so than him, into getting in the game. We'll see if that bridges.
Is it going to be you?
It's not going to be me this time, but we'll see. Maybe next time. I do need to go out and apologize.
I agree. I think the alderman's analysis is correct. You know, this whole voucher thing and sweating the details of it, that's for those, I think that's for a very small minority of us who really read into the policy of that. You know, one of the things that I do for outreach is I go to block parties, and I'll walk around my block parties and talk to people, and I'll introduce myself and I say, hi, I'm the state representative. 2.5 years of a budget have passed. I'll say, I'm your state representative. Anything you guys want to know about what's going on? Any questions, any concerns, anything you want to know about? And they'll kind of go, no, everything's good. Everything's good. Everything's good. Okay? So, yeah, right. That's right. My alley's crumbling. I'm like, call the alderman. So, that's exactly right. That's right. No, and so when you look at this, I mean, so you mentioned two things. Number one, Trump is really taking the pressure off. And number two, this is a major influx of money that is going to ward off it is going to help ward off a property tax increase. So there may still be one coming.
Oh, no, there's a huge one coming.
But it won't be nearly
Thanks, Ben.
I just won't have to vote on it.
No, yeah.
Joe there is going to have to vote on it.
I know.
He took the heat off of you guys, and he put it right on Joe.
Yes, I know.
And we vote in ward order on like the state reps, right? And I got to vote first every single time by voice.
No, it's true. Some of the property tax hike, what a gang they play in you guys. You guys fall for it every year. They're going to let CPS do it, so Joe's off the hook for that vote.
Right.
All right?
No one knows who their CPS
Right. They're all flunkies around.
No one knows. It's
So
going to be
matter.
raise my taxes, and I'm going to say,
No one knows who their CPS representative is because
there is no
We don't have a CPS representative. That's right. We're working on that.
Run to
All
my
right, y'all just got to go.
my freshman. Thank you all for that. I'm sorry I got to run there.
Yeah, did anyone else? Did you guys want to comment on Rom? Is there anything that you want to?
Rom, come on, man. Here's a softball.
Yeah, no, I think the alderman, what he was saying is correct. I think that and what Mark was saying as well, like folks are gonna take what they're being offered, and if we're not offering an alternative vision, folks will say, yeah, it's not the best, but it's what we've got, and that's just the reality of it. So if we're not articulating a vision, then folks will kind of continue to re-elect the doors wherever. So I think the call to action for us and for us who are engaging communities to be engaging communities, to be knocking on doors, to be going to block parties, to be having people move into assemblies, and to be encouraging folks to actually engage in the political process. There are a lot of folks who I know who would be brilliant in politics, but are just like, I actually don't like them because they do so many negative things and it's really dirty. It's like, yeah, we're gonna have to get dirty for it to get clean, right? So like just really pushing people on that.
Right. The worst mayor ever, Ryan, reminds me of the fact that all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys have heard this, a lot of people having this sort of nostalgia for W. Yeah, right. So like, it really wasn't that bad. Just saying. Okay, let's get some questions from the audience. Yes, sir, right there.
State Rep, I was wondering, what happens all the time to any attempt to attack LaSalle Street? You guys are talking about, they're doing $300 trillion worth of trade on LaSalle Street. 300,000. They pay 100,000 to 1%, which is a bribe to the SEC to say, don't regulate us. So why do I have to listen to all this crap? You guys, I did trades down there like 20 years ago, and I paid like $1. $1, and what you do with House Bill 453, for example, Senate Bill 1970. They're both taxes of like 100 to 1% on LaSalle Street. They had passed that, we wouldn't have any property taxes in the whole state. We'd have no sales taxes. But if all the other states are becoming, we have no cigarette taxes. We should completely destroy the economy of the Midwest with a 1/100 of 1% tax on $300 trillion.
Okay, the question is, and to quote, why do I have to listen to all this crap? Spoken very respectfully, I might add. And why aren't those of you in the legislature talking about a tax on LaSalle Street, a financial transaction tax?
What do you have on the floor?
So,
453, House Bill.
yes,
Mary
so,
Flowers.
yeah, that has been, you're right, that has been sort of a mission of Representative Mary Flowers from the West Side. That has been sort of, South Side, excuse me. It's been sort of a mission of hers for a lot of years, is this LaSalle Street tax. And I assure you, she reminds us of it every time she gets to the microphone. So the good news is this: big ideas, big changes take incremental movement. And when I started 5 years ago, the LaSalle Street tax was just outright dismissed. But the more people are learning about it and getting engaged in the process, the more that people are beginning to take it seriously, and there's beginning to be a push for it. If you're asking me to prognosticate, I don't think we'll see it in the next 2 or 4 years. But I think it's making progress. It is making progress. That bill has never been to a committee hearing.
Hey, I talked to all these people, and they all say, "Oh, we're waiting for that bill to get some stuff behind it." I go, "What are you talking about? League of Women Voters, everybody, the school, and all over, everybody who claims that they're, you know what? I don't know what." What are these people that are registered? What do you call them?
You're going up against huge, powerful interests that had the law changed to prevent that very financial transaction tax that you want. You're going up against people that fund both parties. So, to the point of incremental change, like, this is not like passing property tax.
They actually have it in New York, and they won't collect it. They figure it out at the end of every day, and then they say, "Oh, we're going to have $100 million. Well, let's give it back to the hedge fund."
Well, people with a lot of money have a lot of clout and power, as you know, in government.
Outnumber the 152 families.
So organize everybody.
Wait, now let me ask you this: do you think it will even come to market? Did you say it has or had not had a committee vote?
Well, there have been subject matter hearings on the financial transaction tax, but there's never been a committee vote on it. So I mean, I'm being honest here. It's something that I think is gaining steam, and I would like to see it as part of a public debate, public vote. But I would like most things to be part of the public debate, public vote. But under the current leadership structure, I'm being honest. I don't see it. So I think 4 years, 6 years is when it.
How many years?
I think 4 to 6 years. I'm guessing, right? I think it's going to be when there is a change in leadership.
Hey, I bought my house for $29,000. You charged me $16,000 a year to own this goddamn house. And then my neighbors go and they put like 100 Mexicans in our house for 10 years when they sell it for $2 million, and they tell me my house is worth $2 million.
We got it. You're very passionate about it for good reason, but
electric is bad.
he is trying to answer your question, and the support just isn't there. You know, the support isn't there right now. The one thing I'll just chime in, not as an elected official, but all of us have seen certain other kind of issues that seem like they were ages away. All of a sudden, there gets momentum is built, and it just goes really fast. I mean, you're seeing that with some of the changes.
The voucher bill. The voucher bill. That came out of nowhere.
All right. Let's move on to the next question. All right. Yes, Beck.
Okay, so this question is for maybe Mary and Janae. What would $75 million mean for special ed in Illinois or just Chicago public schools alone?
What would $75 million mean for special ed or the Chicago Public Schools?
Let me get out my calculator. Well, it would mean we could have paraprofessionals in the classroom. It would mean we could have the support that is indicated in the IEPs. We could have the law followed.
The law followed. For a mere $75 million, the law could be followed.
So there's so many areas in special ed that have been really decimated under this administration that anything helps. $75 million would go a long way to staff properly, to have appropriate kinds of classrooms with smaller class size than the max number of students you can have in a special ed class. It could do a lot of things.
And I'll just add a little bit before I have to go actually pick up my son, who it was his first day in kindergarten yesterday. Go home, be a mom. But yeah, I mean, I think it would definitely be helpful to actually have librarians and art and clinicians, right? I mean, I come from the classroom, and there are students who are not receiving their minutes. There are students who are actually having their instruction under stairwells. Like, this is a reality, and it's kind of, again, going to the point of we're accepting it because it's being given, and that $75 million would be like so much support, and then again, it would not be enough support. And the thing that's fundamentally wrong about this is that we're arguing about, well, can we just get a little bit more so we can have what we should already have, as opposed to thinking about sustainability in building.
Can you hang out for one more question? Just go one more question here. Somebody. All right, Bird, go for it.
Two questions. First, if the bill hadn't been passed, would the schools have opened this week, and who would have been if that had happened? Who would have been the big winners, losers in that? And secondly, is what have the respective gubernatorial candidates said about the bill?
All right, I think you had like 3 or 4 questions in your one question, Bird. But basically, if this bill hadn't passed, I think the question was, then what would have happened?
Would the schools have opened?
Would the schools have opened this week? Let's start with that.
So my understanding from conversations with staff is that yes, the schools would have opened. What we were looking at was that the operating cash that they would get from the state, so payments have already been missed. And eventually they would get to a point where they would have to say, we can't make payroll and we shut down. That was thought to begin in the early instances, and it's a district by district basis based on their cash reserves in their ability to stay open. So some would have begun closing in the end of September, and then as we got to the middle of October, there would have been more. Some schools, as you can imagine, like say New Trier, would have stayed open all year, no problem. Okay, but yes, some of those schools that are from lower income areas would have begun closing late September through middle October if we didn't pass something soon. So it wasn't essential that we pass that bill at that moment right then. There's no doubt about that. But we were, because we pushed everything in the last minute to create pressure, that's the politics of it, we were really running out of time. So.
Yeah, I would just want to kind of speak to that. That's also accepting the premise of fear-mongering that we have to do this now because things will close. Well, we've actually been running on a deficit for some time now, and doors have been opening. And so I don't think that it was the critical point that needs to happen, as Martwick said. So I just am kind of bothered by the kind of fear tactics that play into making us make decisions that, again, compromise public good.
One more question. How do I talk to my mom about this? She watches HGTV, she's a good Democrat, she doesn't have the same lexicon as us in this room. How do I convince them that money really is being stolen from poor people and given to rich people? How do I convince my friends, privileged people,
Other than having her read the reader?
How about our organizers? Quick answer. How do you translate all this to people who don't think they're personally affected, like maybe his mom?
There are many resources on the Raise Your Hand website. I don't know. I mean, I have the same issue with my family members who really, I've gone to the TIF illumination seminars, and I go back and say, look, they're taking the money, and they do not get it. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know, but I just keep talking and talking and talking. And I know I drive some people crazy. I've lost some Facebook friends, but you just have to keep at it. Keep coming back with facts.
And so the thing that I would say to answer your question is this, is that I've already said all of these facts already, but I'll repeat them. We are dead last in the country in terms of funding education. We need $6.5 billion to put into education to actually fund. Pardon me?
But we're broke, and we need to fund the pensions.
Well, right, and so my point is that when you say how is this stealing from the poor, the answer is this, is that in Illinois, the poor pay the exact same tax rate as the rich, 4.95%. And $75 million, as the last question it was, I can think of a lot of good ways to spend $75 before I give it away to private schools. When you have the highest debt in the nation, who has to pay that debt? Well, everybody does, including the poor people at 4.95%. Instead of putting that $75 million towards debt, towards pension payments, towards funding education properly, towards restoring critical services in oppressed neighborhoods, like mental health counseling and addiction counseling, instead of putting that money towards that, we gave it to private education. And so, yes, everyone in the state of Illinois is going to suffer while we take $75 million of the wealthiest people in our state's money. And we tell them, you no longer owe that to the state to help pay our problems. Everyone else has to pay. Only the wealthy will get that tax credit. Only the wealthiest people and the corporations will get that tax credit. All the rest of us are stuck with the problems, including the $75 million hole that was just blown into our budget.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think one way that we can talk about it is to kind of break down what is being said and find the lie, because it's always kind of the supposition that what's being told to us is straight up truth, and it's not always, unfortunately. So thinking about some of the work I've done with BYP 100 with Black Lives Matter, the biggest thing we got, and this was from Black residents and elder folks who vote, and we were going against policing in the city of Chicago, and the biggest thing that we got back was, but no, we need more police because these drugs, this loitering, this violence. And then one thing that we had to do was do our research and actually illuminate the fact that at that time, 90% of policing was actually picking up folks for misdemeanor marijuana possession. So not solving murders and being on the streets and First 48 and all that jazz. Actually funneling people into the carceral state and making money off of them. And so then the conversation starts to change. And I think there's key facts that you can interject into a conversation where someone's oh, that's not what they're supposed to do. That's not what they do. So we think about a school board and appointed school board. Oh, they make sure that the schools get money and they make sure that the schools are, going to be in a good shape. And then you talk about actually what some of the things that they've passed or actually went passed through. And then folks are oh, okay. So there's always ways to create openings.
All right. Thank you. We should probably free our guests for their other parental and other responsibilities. Thanks to all you guys. You guys are great. This is a great discussion. And thanks to all you guys for coming out the day after your holiday weekend and being engaged. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you all next month. Take care.